The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here along with Dan Rylance, and we're very pleased to be joined on this edition of Eye on Oshkosh by Winnebago County Sheriff Mike Brooks. We're here to talk primarily about the situation with the jail. If you've been reading some of the things in the paper over the last couple of months or so, the jail is in a crowding kind of situation, and it's getting to be an overcrowded situation. At least it's expected to in the next 4 years or so. So we're going to talk a little bit about that this evening and find out what some of the options are and so forth. So thanks again for being here. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Sure. Well, let's talk about this. We've got a jail that's just a little over 4 years old, and it was talked about and planned for 10 plus years. We spent, what, about $30 million on it?
Just under $30 million. It came in about $3 million under budget.
And now here we are looking at being in an overcrowded situation where we're bursting at the seams in about 2011, or as you had mentioned to me before we started taping, about early 2012.
That's
so
correct.
What's causing this overcrowding, first of all?
Well, first I think we need to go back to have a little history on the facility for you to understand why we're at where we're at 4 years into the facility. First, let me say that back in the late 90s, a study was done on the safety building to determine what space needs were needed in that building. And the study said basically that the jail had to be the highest priority. That's what began the talk and the dialogue about building a new facility. The study also did interviews and explored what the past history was as far as the increases in the population, along with talking to the judges, talking to the district attorney's office, talking to probation and parole, and talking to the agencies to determine what their attitudes were about incarceration. How high do you set the bonds? How how long? What charges are you going to make? How aggressive is your law enforcement community in making arrests? All those things go into a determination. Based on that, the projection was that by the year 2000, late 2009, early 2010, we would be at capacity when we hit 350 beds. Now, the big discussion at the time, and I'm sure you and I have had conversations about this, big discussion was how big do you build it? And there were proponents of making it 600 beds. There were proponents of 400 beds. A compromise was reached at 347 beds. And but recognizing that 10 years later we'd be starting to need to have housing, additional beds for housing, which means that somewhere between 4 and 5 years before that we need to start looking at it. Based on the utilization of GPS, the drug court, the new STOP program that we were lucky enough to talk to the legislators in, to giving us here in Winnebago County a pilot program for drunk driving offenses, we've been able to project, when you add those together and you add a day reporting program that we're looking at adding for next year, we believe we can push it back until 2011, early 2012. The other thing that coupled into it is that, you recall 2 years ago, it'll become 2 years this November, because of the freeze, I closed the Huber Center. And while that sounds like we emptied out that facility and had no impact on the jail, in actuality, there were 15 prisoners that were in the Huber Center that we said are not candidates for GPS, so we had to move them into the main jail. And in reality, that was the equivalent of about a 1 year increase. So what I'm trying to tell you is it could have been worse than what it is, but we were able to do some things to help push it off a little bit. The reality of it is a decision has to be made at this point as to when do we do something. Do we wait until we have the actual need, or do we build in advance and utilize some type of housing contract with other counties or the state of Wisconsin to help offset the construction costs along with the original operating costs so that we in Winnebago County don't pay as much. Or a third option would be to say, we're just going to house prisoners out of county. And the comment I made to the board, my recommendation, wasn't to do any one of the three. It wasn't to do nothing, but it was to say, look, you know, we built this facility, we have this Huber Center, we are better off to use today's dollars, or as close to today's dollars as we can, to meet our future needs, and in the interim, allow us to rent this out to either the state or the county. I'm very fond of making the comment that, you know, I hear frequently, and as the taxpayer I agree, that we need to run things like you would a business. You can't build a jail to be full on the day that you occupy it, and to let the empty beds sit when you have all these fixed costs. You have to look at doing that. And that's, so my recommendation to them was, as a taxpayer and as a sheriff, we're going to have a need. I believe we should look at going sooner rather than later. But there's a lot of study that needs to be done yet before they make that decision.
Sure. You had mentioned that one option would be to just house, you know, prisoners from our county. How many prisoners do we have that we're housing from other counties?
We averaged just a little bit over 59 prisoners during the month of July. They're strictly from Dane County. And that's one of the reasons why we're artificially overcrowded at this point, is that what empty beds we do have, we are filling with Dane County prisoners.
Okay. And how much money is that bringing us on a monthly basis?
Just a little bit over $1.1 million annually.
Okay.
And the interesting thing, excuse me, the interesting thing is if you take a look at if we were to lose the Dane County prisoners today, just for the sake of this discussion, we would lose the $1.1 million in revenue. But I wouldn't, we have 6 pods out there, 6 housing pods. I wouldn't be able to close any of those pods to help offset that reduction in revenue because I still have enough of my own Winnebago County prisoners that I would have to keep all 6 pods open. So the only reduction would really be in the associated medical costs, the associated meal costs, uniforms, and whatever small portion of our heating and water utilities would be used by them showering. So in essence, we come up with almost $898,000 in lost revenue that we can't make up in lost expense. And that's really the problem with the tax freezes. Where do we make up that $898,000? Does it come out of the sheriff's office, or does it come out of some other part of the county government?
Okay.
I just don't understand the financial thing you just went through of saving money by having out-of-county people in it. Maybe you want to walk through that. I mean, it seems
Sure.
you're in the business of making money for a county jail. Is that?
I think that's a very fair assessment
Yeah.
of, in essence, what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And not only making money, but offsetting the expenses to the taxpayers. What I'm trying to say is that, for the sake of this discussion, if my labor is X, and I'm going to have that same X whether I have the out-of-county prisoners or not, I can reduce X by bringing in the revenue. And so in this situation, we receive $1.1 million in revenue, but my additional expenses, the expenses I would not have if I didn't have those prisoners, is a little more than 200,000. I believe it's about 238. I don't have the figures are here. I just didn't look at them. But what it boils down to is I would still have all those expenses, but I would also have an additional 898,000 if I were to have Dane County leave at this point. So it really is a case of utilizing those empty beds to help offset the costs, and that is why we are artificially crowded at this point. If I lost all those prisoners, I would be back down in the area of about 295. but it's a 355 bed capacity, and because of the classification of prisoners, we would still have to have all 6 pods open. So I'm not saving anything. I'm not able to close down a pod or anything like that. So I still have the same expenses.
What's an addition going to cost you?
Well, and that's why we need to do this study.
Yeah.
First of all, let me say a couple things. The county did authorize a study done last year of what it would cost to convert the Huber Center, and that projection would be $2.3 million. Now, what a lot of people don't realize about the Huber Center is that it was built under a different code than what a regular jail is. And because of that, the only prisoners I can put in the Huber Center are those that are sentenced with Huber, which means that in order to utilize it, we would have to harden that facility to make it a lockdown facility, and that's about $2.3 million.
So you're probably going to add 2 pods rather than renovate the Huber Center if it's...
Well, you know, I got real mixed feelings about this,
Yeah.
because I believe when we asked the architect, and obviously he wasn't going to do this for free, but when we asked him to do the same type of study, to give us an off the top of his head, he said, well, it could be around $10 million to add those 2. So when you start adding, I mean, there's a huge difference between $10 million and 2.3.
Certainly.
And really what it boils down to is it's about $13 million after you pay interest on it, or $3 million. So we got about a $10 million difference. Where you have to make the decision, where the board's going to have to make the decision at that point, is taking a look at the life cycle costs along with the construction costs and say which one's going to be cheaper to operate. Anytime you have a facility and you add on to it, in this facility, if I didn't mention it, one of the mandates from the county board was that we ensure that this facility had the core areas large enough to house up to 800 prisoners. So that means the kitchen, the property room, the booking area, visitation, which we handled differently instead of creating a large visitation area, the laundry room. Those types of things were built large enough to accommodate additions. So when we add on to this building, we don't have to worry about those types of things, or we don't have to worry about transporting the meals over there. We don't have to worry about transporting the laundry over there. We also recognize that it will take more staff to operate a standalone system, jail area than it does to add on to our current facility, right, because we can draw that sure personnel that are already there. So it's going to be a tough decision for the county board, because as you take a look at it, there's a huge difference in the construction costs, but there's also a tremendous financial savings in the operational cost as far as labor goes. And so you have to really take a look out I would suggest they take out a look out as far as the life cycle of that building, which should be at least 50 years, and say which way is going to be the cheaper for us to go. Then you got to factor in the wild card, and that is, how do you justify leaving that building, the Huber Center, sitting empty, and is there some other use for it? And it's not going to be an easy decision for the county board.
If you were to add on 2 more pods, how many beds would that give you?
We would go to 144 beds, which is the same amount of beds that we would have at the Huber Center.
Okay.
So you'd be up to almost 600.
We'd be up to, what would that be, 489? Yeah, 489.
Okay.
Yeah.
So either way, whether you redo the Huber Center or you add 2 pods, you're gaining about 144 beds.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right.
All right. I mean, obviously there's a lot of discussion that needs to happen here
That's
yet.
correct.
When does this actually go to the county board for some kind of a vote? Or do you have any idea on that yet?
Well, I think we're quite a ways away from that issue. What we need to do, what I'm going to ask to be done first, is to bring in somebody to study. First of all, let's determine what the actual construction cost will be for that. Then we know, like we know with the Huber Center, it's 2.3. We know this is what it is. Then we also, I think we need to have that same group take a study, do a study of the life cycle costs, and also take a look at the staffing needs to make sure that we are on with our projections. These numbers that I gave out to the county board were based on a lot of different assumptions as far as costs, and we want to make sure that somebody else takes a look at it. Then I think we go to the county board and we say, okay, here's your options, and at that point I may have some recommendation to the board as the sheriff, but my recommendation as a citizen is always going to be, you do the one that is going to be the least expensive to run over the long haul, or the cheapest life cycle cost for the facility. I'm not going to be sheriff forever, but yet I'm a taxpayer, and I'll continue to be a taxpayer, and I recognize my money is just as important as everybody else's, and that's the decision I hope they make.
So I guess the reason, Sheriff, that I asked when you thought this might go to the county board is we saw with the current jail, how long that volleyed back and forth, back and forth, and you've got a situation where something's going to have to be happening so that you're not caught with your pants down in 4 years from now.
That's right.
And if you're going to build, there's going to be more time required for construction than if you were to just redo the Huber Center.
Right.
So I mean, how much of a window do you really have here?
Oh, okay. And I'm sorry, I didn't see where you were going.
No, that's all right.
Yeah,
that's okay.
But and those are very good points. The architect tells us if we add on, we're looking somewhere between 12 and 15 months. If we do the conversion of the Huber Center, we're looking somewhere between 8 and 10 months.
Okay.
Now, that 8 and 10 months for the Huber Center is pretty solid. The 12 to 15 months is still a little bit of flexible because the work would have to be done outside, so weather conditions could actually prolong it or shorten it up, much like happened with the current facility. It's my goal. I went to my committee with a request for a dollar amount, and I made a mistake when I went to that committee in that I did not clarify where the money would come from. So I got to go back to my committee again. And in the interim, we're trying to lock down the cost so that we can give them, instead of a not to exceed, but give them an actual cost of what the study would cost. It's my hope to have this in front of the county board either just before Christmas or just after Christmas.
Okay. Does that still allow you enough time to for dickering around if the board decides that they're going to go back and forth like they did before?
Well, part of the problem is it's an election year for them then, and not that I'm saying that they'll banter it around for election or political reasons, but we also have to recognize that it will take a few months of discussion. And then, it seems like every year we have a few extra, a few different county board members, and you got to bring them up to speed. It's my hope that if they make a decision to build, that they make the decision by springtime of next year so that we can, by sometime in 2009, be in that facility.
Okay.
That does give us, that serves two purposes. I'm coming to the point where I'm going to have to take less and less prisoners from whatever county or state I deal with. So that does start cutting down on the revenue and does increase the tax levy. So it's important to get it, as you said, it's important to get this done as quickly as possible, but it's also, and I'm sure you understand, it's important to make sure that they get the information that they need.
Oh, sure.
So you have money to plan the additions, about 40,000 either for the two pods or the Huber Center right now?
No, the Huber Center's already been paid for.
Okay.
But that study was just to look at the conversion.
Okay.
And what I'm saying is that the money that I requested, I'm trying to get that locked down instead of saying not to exceed 40,000. I'm trying to get a better dollar amount locked down. Okay. And at that point, what I do is I will work with the county exec and the finance director to determine where that money would come. And most likely it's going to come out of contingency to help offset that.
Your jail proposal now is not in the 2007, 2011 CPI budget. Don't you have to get that in there?
Part of the it has to go in there at some point.
Okay.
And there is latitude to insert it in there right now. That's a question that's been asked to me by the county exec and other people. How come it's not in there? If we remember, we just closed this down a year ago, the Huber Center, and at that and that helped create this overcrowding issue. We were studying the Huber Center. We got that information back this spring, and we started talking about this now. This would be about the time that we would start putting it into that budget, and into that capital project plan. And in essence, by making these presentations, I hope that's what we're looking at doing. But when it comes to the timing, we're about 5 years out, and that is the capital project. So.
Question on the Huber
Can I
Center.
interrupt just for one more second?
Yeah, absolutely.
The one thing I want to mention is just because you put it in now doesn't mean it has to wait 5 years.
Right.
And I don't know if I did a good job of explaining that.
But you got to get it in the CPI to get your, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
And
that's
where it's got to be in the capital project plan.
it's not going to go.
Right.
Did you close the Huber Center without going through the board or the county exec? Did you just do that on your own?
Actually, I went through my committee. The decision was mine to recommend that. Okay. How a prisoner is housed is up to the sheriff.
So you don't have to go through the board and the county executive to do that?
It's just like taking in prisoners from another county. You really don't have to. But I have never been one not to make the board aware of what I'm doing. Matter of fact, I even, as I said, I talked to the county exec before I made the decision. I talked to my committee before I made the decision, and basically said if you guys can think of another way we can do this, I'm in favor of it. But I was told to cut $1 million, and that's
the way you did it.
Yeah, and I to this day still don't believe that's the best way to do business, but it was a viable way to do business.
I want to get into incarceration and alternatives to incarceration. First of all,
I'm sorry, before we do that, was there anything else on the jail itself that that you think viewers should know?
Well, I'd just like to go back once again, and because I've heard two themes in the community. One is, why didn't you put this into the capital project plan? And this would be about the time we would be doing it. And anybody that says that they're not aware that this is coming, the county board gave me money last year to have a study done on the Huber Center. I've made this the comment publicly. It's been in the newspaper. I talked to the editorial board. Excuse me, I did not talk to the editorial board about this. I talked to them when I closed the Huber Center. But everybody knows that this is happening. The second question, or the other thing that everybody's saying was, well, you're pushing for the addition of pods. What I'm pushing for is a study that shows us what the costs are going to be. And then I'm going to say that as a citizen, as a sheriff, my push then is going to be to do it at whatever's the cheapest way possible. I recognize that the county board may choose not to do anything about this. I think that's a major mistake because of what it's going to cost us down the line. But once again, it really is their decision. It's my job to figure out how to make that work.
Okay.
As a taxpayer, continuing on this, I'm thinking $30 million 4.5 years ago, and there are so many needs in the county, and you may go another 10 million and another 3 or 4. I mean, this is the Cadillac of probably county jails. I've never been in a county jail,
right.
But I mean, this is not a mom and pop type thing. This is a really. I've been there. I went to one of your tours. It's a wonderful facility.
Right.
The kitchens are bigger than probably one floor of the 100 block. I mean, they're huge. I mean, and so, as a taxpayer, I'm thinking, God, this is a hell of a lot of money in a close proximity. I realize you're going down 4 years, but that's $40 million in 10 years. That's a lot of money.
Well, and once again, it goes back to the decision making at the time we built the facility. Do you build it big enough to meet the needs through 10 years, or do you build it big enough to meet the needs through 15 years, or do you build it big enough to make? So the decisions that were made then, and I'll tell you what I was asked. I was asked, are you happy with this? And I said, this will get us through 10 years, and I'm happy with that. But it's only going to get us through 10 years. So when I have people say, geez, you're just coming to us 4 years from now, the one thing they forget is that was a study when you follow the matrix of the population growth from 1999. We were housing prisoners out for a 3-year period, and that number of inmates that we had was growing towards that 350. So this is not something that makes me happy to be coming to you, but it's not anything that people that have been in county government or were reading the newspaper stories should be surprised. They knew this was going to happen by 2009, 2010. And in actuality, I think our staff has done a great job in bringing in other ways to deal with inmates that has pushed it out at least another year and maybe a little bit more than that year, especially in light of the fact that when we did close the Huber Center down, we basically took in 15 inmates, which was about the annual growth that we see in inmates. So I'm not happy about it. There are a lot of other expenses that the Sheriff's Office is going to be asking for as far as radio communications, et cetera. There's a lot of needs out there. But it's up to the board to decide how we're going to house these prisoners.
As long as you're looking at redoing, you know, adding on to the jail and so forth, would you ever entertain, you know, finding a way to house juveniles? Because, you know, you and I have talked about this when you've been on in the past, and even when I came out to visit you at the jail, and it was just a visit, that's all it was for. You know, we're paying other counties to house our juveniles, and we actually pay these other, like we pay Outagamie County for X number of beds, whether those beds are being used or not. They have them sort of reserved for our youth. And they may fill them all up, they may fill only one up. Would you ever, at any point, if we were going to expand the current jail, entertain a wing for juveniles?
Well, and I, first of all, let me state that I don't make that decision as far as the juveniles go. They're not under the sheriff's office. The juvenile detention facility and the funds for that are under Human Services. But the question you're really asking is that something we should look at if we have to build on? And I don't think there's much doubt that we need to reevaluate again what the costs are and whether or not we can do it cheaper, and maybe even generate some revenue also by doing housing for other counties. The one problem that you run into in that latter statement as far as housing is both Fond du Lac and Outagamie are doing it, and there really aren't as many children in lockup as there used to be. Now, as far as looking at it, we need to take a look at, can we do it cheaper? We also need to take a look at it and say, do we maybe need to decrease the number of beds that we reserve every day? I think it's been almost 10 years, excuse me, a little over 10 years that we've been doing this, and it is time again to take a look at how it's being done. And this would be the right time.
Sure. Well, and that's why I brought it up, because especially with the price of fuel these days, you know, to transport these kids from our county to another county, and then I don't know if you have to transport them back for court appearances, or if they're doing it by video appearance or whatever. I don't know, is that a possibility between counties?
Not at this, for their hearings, I believe that they have to show up, but even if they didn't, I should point out that video conferencing, while it has its uses, really doesn't have the same amount of uses as what people think, because anything that's adversarial, you have to have the defendant in the courtroom for. As far as transporting, and let me go back to your comments about gasoline, whatever arresting agency takes that child into custody, they do the transport, but we do all the transports for court and for anything else that's associated afterwards. You know, if you live in Neenah, Menasha right now, it's a great deal. When it was down in Oshkosh, it was a great deal for Oshkosh, and it wasn't a good deal for Neenah, Menasha. But no matter what you do, for the arresting agencies, there's going to be costs no matter what. But because we transport the prisoners back and forth, or the juveniles back and forth, there are added costs because of where we're transporting them from. So
if you've got a juvenile going to Outagamie County, they come and pick that juvenile up when they're first booked in?
No, I'm sorry. Oshkosh, let's say Oshkosh Police Department takes a juvenile into custody. They transport them up to Outagamie County, but then for their first and any subsequent court hearings, the sheriff's office, through our transport division, brings them back and forth.
So the fuel right now is transporting the kids to Fond du Lac or Outagamie County. That's on the city.
For Oshkosh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well.
Yeah.
Follow up on Cheryl's question. Any idea maybe to renovate the Huber Center for a juvenile detention center?
That has been talked about, and I think, you know, we want to first determine whether or not we're going to use it for the adults. Because if we're not going to use it for the adults, as I said earlier, if we're not going to use it, then what use is it going to be, and what can it be converted to?
Okay.
So,
can you give us a little demographics of who's in the jail and what sort of crimes they've committed, and male and female?
Well, let's see, male and female, boy, and I just supplied this to the Oshkosh Northwestern today.
You don't have to be totally, give us
okay.
Yeah.
Ballpark figures, out of the 355, we're probably averaging about 315, 320 are male, the remainders being female. We're averaging about 60 probation holds per day. Of that 60, probably 95% of those are felony probation holds or felony, excuse me, that they were arrested for felonies and they're on a hold or they're being revoked for a felony charge. The other 5% is for misdemeanors. We are very heavy in drug-related charges. We are heavy in sexual assault, very heavy in OWI. That's why the big push for the STOP program. We are starting to see more violent crimes, people arrested for violent crimes in our jail. And it's very interesting if you take a look at each of these, they have different waiting periods, or what we call average length of stay. If you're being revoked, it's probably going to be somewhere around 50 days if you're being revoked from probation or parole. If you're in for a violent crime, you're probably going to be in there for several months before you're adjudicated. We are seeing a lot more pre-sentence recommendations from probation and parole to sentence to county jails rather than to the prisons. So we're starting to see some longer sentences for crimes that we didn't, I don't want to say crimes we didn't see before. We're starting to see people sentenced to jail for longer periods of time than what we saw before for the same crime. We also, you know, it's very interesting because I was asked about the demographics, and I will tell you that I do believe that demographics are very much socially, economically driven as far as jail population, and there's all kinds of studies out there to show that. But we are seeing an increase in violent crime nationwide. We are still, Oshkosh and the Valley is still one of the safest places in the United States to live, but we're seeing more violent crime too. So if we're seeing more, you can imagine what it's like elsewhere. But between that, a lot more mandated jail time as a result of legislation. There still is some truth to the fact that as a bubble, juvenile population bubble gets into that 17 to 24, we see a spike in our jail incarceration because they are more likely an offender than other age groups. We see a lot of domestic abuse. They're normally a very short original stay with us, you know, a day or two, and they bond out, and then they may get some jail time down the line. So it's
really all things, isn't it?
Yeah,
huh?
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. The one area that we used to have problems with was sentencing for traffic violations, other than OWI. The courts, both Winnebago County courts and the municipalities, have done an excellent job of looking for other ways of dealing with those issues. And we're down to 1.58 or 1.85 inmates per day that are there, which is a tremendous drop. So.
The state of Wisconsin has twice as many people in jails and prisons in Minnesota, as an example. In an ideal world, if you could rewrite the laws, who would you not put in jail? Would you not put the drug offenders in jail, for example? Would you? I mean, I've heard you. I know when Feingold comes every once in a while, you always come and testify. You have a nice presentation, yeah. And I think one of your pitches was about looking at that issue of you know, sentencing and things. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Well, and actually, it wasn't so much that I'm saying that I believe we take the discretion out of the hands of the judges for certain crimes, as much as what I'm saying is make it easier for us to do alternatives to incarceration. Okay. And let me use, for example, the STOP program. Okay. The STOP program, if you go back to when I first took office, one of the first group of people I met was a group that had provided alternatives to incarceration for Dakota County, Minnesota. Okay. And Dakota County is a southeastern suburb of the Twin Cities. And they were doing all kinds of great things as far as programs, counseling, getting towards the root problem. And unfortunately, it fell on deaf ears as I talked about it. That is something that I think is the thing that the state legislature needs to enable us on. It needs to recognize the STOP program. It used to be, and actually still is in almost every county other than Winnebago and a handful down in southeastern Wisconsin, you have to be convicted of OWI fourth time before you can be placed on probation, before you can get a longer jail sentence. We went down, Judge Scott Wolt, district attorney, at that time wasn't the district attorney, but Christian Gossett, Harvey Rensdorf, we all went down there, and what we said to the legislature is, you need to give us a pilot program that allows us to offer options to these second and third time OWIs in an effort to force some type of treatment on them to prevent them from becoming a third and fourth time offender. And right now we have, if I remember correctly, last week I was told there's 84 individuals in that program. And as I said, I am seeing a decrease in my pre-sentence jail population as a result of the drug program and of the STOP program. It's those types of things that the legislature has to make it easier for us to do. There's all kinds of enabling legislation in Minnesota that we don't have here in Wisconsin.
You know, speaking of drunk driving and so forth, MAD, not the local chapter, but the national chapter, I saw this on TV probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. They are actually advocating mandatory interlock devices on vehicles for people convicted, and I believe even after just one time. Mm-hmm. Do you have an opinion on that? And, you know, do these things work as a whole?
There isn't any system that can't be defeated, but you know, my point is I'd rather do something than do nothing. I am very much, let me use the GPS program for example. If we know we have somebody that has an alcohol issue, we not only put him on the GPS so we can track where he's at, we put him on what's called a scram, which tests the vapor off of his skin throughout the day to determine whether or not he's been drinking. And if he's been drinking, it registers, we get a phone call and he comes back to jail. So those things, you know, as when I started out, it was nothing more than a forfeiture for drunk driving. And as I've grown older and as I've gone to more fatalities and seen more things happen, you know, my experience tells me that we need to deal with the carnage that we're seeing on the highways. So I support that stuff, but I also support the fact that locking them up is not going to reduce recidivism. You've got to do more than lock people up. And if we're going to continue, if we want to stop building jails, if you want to stop spending that $10 million, then you got to recognize you got to stick some money on the front end to deal with these issues. And so that's where I stand with that. And I would have no problem at all with the state of Wisconsin requiring that for even a first-time OWI operator.
And make the defendant pay for it.
Oh yeah.
How much do they run? Do you know offhand?
No, I don't. It's been a while. They're not as prevalent as what they used to be. But you know, I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of conditions that you can put on a defendant that will be a great incentive for him to be willing to fork out the money. And I'm telling you, they find the money. It's just like with the bracelet program, the GPS. It's $22 a day. They tell me they can't find the money, but you know what? When they sit in jail for a few days, they go, geez, I can find that money.
And it looks pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah, so.
I want to switch from OWI prevention, like Cheryl talked about, to sexual offenders. I mean, there is a national mood in this country when these people get out of jail, that they want to segregate them to a certain area of their community. And so just hypothetically, let's say someone in the Common Council in Oshkosh introduces an ordinance to require sexual offenders who come back out of jail to live in a certain area of Oshkosh, and they asked you to testify as to the pros and cons of that. What would be your response?
Or not in the city at all.
Or not in the city at all. Thank you. Yeah.
And the second part is much easier than to answer than the first part. But I have reservations. I live in a township where we have such an ordinance.
Okay.
I have reservations about it. The first reservation is the fact I don't want to give a false sense of security to my community. You know, they think, well, we've got this ordinance, now our children are protected. That's not true. We also know that you're more likely to be the victim of a family member when it comes to children, or some type of family member, some close friend, than you are to a stranger.
85% nationally.
Right,
yeah.
Okay. We also know that in the state of Wisconsin, we have a 93% compliancy rate with registering. We start doing things like not giving them any place to live. We start, legislation was introduced to require them to have something on their license plates that identifies them. We're going to drive them underground.
Right.
And that scares me more. you know, what we forget is that up to about 15 years ago, you had sexual offenders living around you, and we never knew it. At least now we know it. And I really believe that some of the ordinances that prevent them from living by parks, schools, those are all very valid. But if we start making it so tight that there isn't any place for them to live, or there's for example, I believe, and I didn't hear the whole story, so if I get any of this wrong, please jump in. But my understanding is there's a situation going on in Green Bay right now where it's an area where the guy could live, but the landlord refuses to allow him to live there. You're going to force these people to go underground. They're going to become more and more comfortable if they're underground, they're going to become more and more comfortable that they can do something without being detected, and so I have concerns about that. I have, as I said again though, if they asked me to talk about an ordinance that was very restrictive around places where children gather, I would be 100% in support of it. I just question if we're going down the right track when we do what Green Bay did.
See, and I'm not even sure, Sheriff, if an ordinance that restricts them from living near schools or parks is the answer, because all that does is restrict them from living there. It doesn't mean they can't drive down the street.
That's
it doesn't
right.
mean they can't drive through the park and just sit there and prey on kids all day long.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't stop them from doing a lot of the behaviors that they do day to day.
And I'm not disagreeing that and that's going back to my first comment is, you know, some of this is a false sense of security. We still need to teach our children, they used to call it stranger danger, but the reality of it is it's not always strangers that you have to worry about. No. But we need to teach our children to act on their feelings. When they start feeling uncomfortable around somebody, we need to teach them how to be able to act and how to deal with that issue. I guess I do believe somewhat and I'm in favor of the restrictions around schools and where children gather, because once again, I think we want to be as safe as we can, that we don't have the neighbor living there and leering at the kids and being able to get them quickly out of the way.
Good point.
But on the same token, I think we're wrong if we give a false sense of security. I think we're wrong if we drive them underground. I think we're going to have more problems. And like I said, we have a 93% compliancy rate for sexual offenders that register in the state of Wisconsin. That's huge in comparison. And I still would rather know who my enemy is than have them living in an area and not be a registered offender.
Sure.
The whole access of internet too, it's so much soliciting for this. And how do you regulate that?
Yes.
Put them in an area, but if they have a computer,
Yeah. But it's interesting though, that same computer is of an aid to you and I and Cheryl.
Right.
You know, I just got a phone call from, and I don't remember who it was. I spoke to a town chairman who said they got a phone call from one of their constituents who said, I went home and checked on the internet and we have a sexual offender living in our neighborhood. She knows. She didn't know before. The internet helps us with that. We also have taken a little different stance, and this comes from my concern, my personal bias, and we've taken a stance now that we will do a public hearing on every sex offender, and it comes out of listening to parents talk and their concerns. And if I can do anything to alleviate that and also get them to educate their children by them knowing that this is occurring, I'm in favor of that. So while most places don't necessarily do it on everyone, we have taken a stance that we will.
How does the state, because the last I understood, Sheriff, the state does not distinguish, I mean, when you have to register as a sex offender, it does not distinguish what kind of sex offense necessarily you have committed. For example, the teenager who has consensual sex with his teenage girlfriend is deemed a sex offender if he's, prosecuted and convicted, and yet I don't view him as a sex offender in the same way that I would view someone who's preying on little boys or little girls, or a priest who's going after little boys in church at confession or what have you. It's not the same at all. And to restrict them from living in certain places especially seems just really unfair. Or to be able to look them up on the internet and say, oh my God, look at here, we've got this sex offender in the neighborhood, and yet you don't really know what the level of offense really was.
Right. And it's very interesting you say that, because no matter what we do, we always seem to go overboard a little bit. Every time we try and respond to something or deal with an issue, we go overboard. And in this situation, I think you'll see some remedial legislation down the line that allows for that situation that you're talking about, and we've got this individual in our jail right now, that may allow him to somehow get off the sexual registry list. But I still believe that there's nothing wrong with having him on it while he's in jail, while he's still on probation or parole, and then when he's getting near that end, maybe it should be reviewed. But unfortunately, and just let me give you another example, not offender related, but CCAP. You can be arrested for something, be acquitted, but your name is always going to be on CCAP. And that's another issue that I have a little concern about, because they put it on there long before you're adjudicated, and I sometimes wonder if we're not doing harm where we shouldn't be doing harm. And I know of one situation where a young man was arrested for hit and run felony, and actually he should have never been arrested because the elements of the law weren't there. All it was a little fender bender. He should have got himself a ticket, but he should never been put in jail. But he is on CCAP for being arrested for a hit and run felony, and that's not right. But
no, I agree.
Yeah,
that's not. But even if they don't remove it in its entirety, just categorize it differently so that people can look at it and say, okay, he was having sex with his girlfriend.
Right.
As opposed to a 40 or 50-year-old man going after a 7-year-old child.
Yeah. But it goes back to the same response. It's we seem to always go overboard, and then we have to do remedial legislation. There isn't any, and I found out that, talking about the hit and run, I found out there wasn't any legislation to allow that to happen. This is kind of the same thing. So it does take people in the community saying to their legislators, we need to look at this again and try and bring it back more to the center.
Sure. Go ahead.
This is my favorite question to law enforcement officers, and I'm sure you don't remember me when you ran for re-election last time. I asked you a question about consolidating SWAT teams in Winnebago County. And I don't have your exact words, but I think it was a wonderful answer.
Yeah.
You said you were going to look into it.
Yes.
When we talked to the new chief of police I asked my SWAT question.
Right.
Everyone thinks it's a good idea, but no one ever does anything about it. Do we need 4 SWAT teams in Winnebago County?
Well, I'm surprised I told you I'll look into it, and let me tell you why.
Okay. Well, you're up for election, maybe.
No, because actually my response normally is there's no reason in the world for us to have 4 SWAT teams.
Oh.
Why we're not doing this, I don't know.
Okay.
8 years ago, well, I shouldn't say that. When DJ Forsey was still the chief in Neenah, I can remember at Neenah PD we have an IS meeting of all the users, fire and law enforcement, and in talking to DJ and the Menasha chief and the Oshkosh chief and the town of Menasha chief, excuse me, the town of Menasha chief wasn't there that day, and myself, I said to them, why aren't we looking at regionalizing a SWAT team? And to be quite frank with you, I even tried to sweeten the pot by saying, look, I'll pick up all the equipment costs. And it's just, I've never been able to get people to go along with it. Interestingly enough, I'm sure Chief Groyle may not have gone into this, but we work very closely with them. About half, at any call-up, about half the team that shows up is the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office. We're also starting to do the same thing with the city of Menasha. There is no reason in the world for SWAT teams. But I also took it a step further that day, and I questioned why we have so many detective bureaus. Once again, investigations can be centralized. You can decrease the number of captains and lieutenants for savings and not decrease the number of worker bees or detectives that are out there. And the advantage to that, from my perspective, is that that captain that's running that division and his 2 subordinates, or 3 or 1 or whatever is figured out, are going to see trends long before it's going to occur when you have a captain at the sheriff's office, a captain at Oshkosh PD, a captain at Neenah. They're going to see that, and it becomes not only more efficient, but it becomes more effective. And let me take it a step further. February or March of 1995, I gave a presentation to the downtown Rotary, and my comment to them was, I don't understand why, nearing on the 21st century, we still have a sheriff who only has to be 18 and live in the county the day he takes office. We need to look at consolidation. We need to look at consolidating all the services. It does not make a lot of sense to me when you're talking at a community of 165,000 people, Winnebago County, that we have all these different chiefs and all these different captains that could be streamlined. And that's where the savings is. It's not in reducing the number of officers on the road or the number of detectives, but it's getting rid of the people with the big salaries. You don't need those. Much larger communities operate with less top rank than what we have. And when I say top rank, I'm not talking about lieutenants, I'm talking about sheriffs and chiefs.
Sure.
So I have always been in favor of this, and be quite frank with you, with the freeze that's on with the levies, well, let me take a step back. I also believe it needs to be absorbed by the county. I believe public safety is the entire county's responsibility, but I don't believe it should be the sheriff. I don't believe that the qualifications for sheriff are appropriate for what you need. You need somebody who, and not to say I haven't worked my way up, I've got a college degree, but I think you need to ensure that you have somebody that's hired that is earned that position and is capable of operating as the CEO of a law enforcement agency. But with the freeze on the levy that we have right now, you're never going to get it to happen.
Right.
And there's also some statutes that are in the way. Unless all the cities would eliminate their departments and contract with the sheriff's office, it's not going to happen. And I'll say this again, I don't believe the sheriff should be the head of the CEO of that regional concept. Yeah. So.
Okay. Those were very thoughtful answers. I guess my frustration is that most people would say, those are really good ideas, but then it's not going to happen because you have these little different political subdivisions that don't want to give up those things.
Well,
right?
and in essence, that's it. And I really do believe we missed a window. We had several of our chiefs that were going to be retiring. I've made no bones about the fact that I have no intention of running another term. You know, the timing was great. The problem is, in 1995, what I told that downtown Rotary was, it's not going to happen until we have a taxpayer revolt. Well, my gosh, aren't we there? You know, so
I'm
listening, but
yeah. But I've said the county exec Mark Harris and I've had conversations about this on several occasions. He is very much in favor of it, but with the way the freeze is structured, consolidation doesn't get you around or would be prohibited because you wouldn't be able to generate the revenue to do it. So there's a lot of things that need to be worked on, and we need to start getting the legislators' attention. Instead of worrying about carrying concealed weapon and some of these other issues, they need to be doing the legislation that's going to enable local government to provide the services yet hold the costs down, and consolidation is one of the ways to go.
Yeah, they can't pass a budget, they're not going to do consolidation.
Well, and it's a shame. I hope we're not in gridlock like they are in Washington, D.C.
It looks like that's where we're headed.
Yeah.
And the two budgets from the Democratic Senate and the Assembly Republicans, it's like the difference between night and day.
Well, let me give you a classic example, and let me go back to the jail for a minute. The county exec, Mark, has said to me more than on one occasion, if they pass this thing, there's no way we can build that jail. And I said, but Mark, it doesn't matter, we're still going to pay for it. Well, no, we can't. I said, well, Mark, if we don't build on, then we're going to house prisoners out of county. We're going to pay for it either out of capital or we're going to pay for it out of operations. Any way you look at it, you still got to house your prisoners. In essence, that's why we need to have the ability to regionalize things and find ways to save money and still meet the needs. So.
We've talked some here, Sheriff, about the programs that have worked, like the drug court and the STOP program and so forth, and we're quickly running out of time, but what are some of the programs that we currently have that aren't working?
Good question.
Well, actually, and I'm disappointed that I have to say this, but because of budget cuts, I don't have the programs that we've tried to implement. But I do believe that the day reporting that we will implement will bring those programs back in. And what they are is more in-depth counseling type programs, getting family involvement, helping with their support network to help prevent them from recommitting a crime. They're not, and I hesitate to tell you that they're geared just at alcohol or just at drugs, but they're geared at those root issues that have led people to commit crimes. And family services, there were two people that bid on this. Both of them offer not only the day-to-day making sure that people appear in court and doing compliance checks, but they offer those types of additional programs, counseling, life skill issues. Unfortunately, jails have become the cracks that mentally ill patients have fallen through and end up in jails. They'll do things with them to help them develop life skills and to prevent things that have ended up with them being in jail. So it's a very comprehensive program, and I would be very happy to have you come and listen to the presentation that make, and you'll get a feel for why I'm excited about this. I'm guardedly excited in the respect that I think it has potential to push back our needs even further than 2011, 2012. But you know, much like the GPS program, I think we need to walk before, or excuse me, we need to crawl before we walk, and see what kind of experience we're going to have. But the programs that don't include family, and I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, spiritual type of faith-based, are the ones that don't seem to be as successful as the ones that work on family support and faith-based.
Okay. We're just about out of time.
Sorry.
We're down to, no, that's fine, that's fine.
Yeah.
We've got like about a minute left.
Okay.
Just very quickly, something fun here to end on
Okay.
a lighter note.
Yeah.
You said it's up to the sheriff where the prisoners or how they're incarcerated.
Right.
What about the Paris Hilton thing? For example, if a judge had sent you something that said no electronic monitoring, no home arrest or house arrest, would you have released this person a day after they checked in?
It's very interesting you say that, because I recognize we need to work with the court systems, and so I tell the judges, if you don't want somebody to go on GPS, put it in the judgment of conviction, and I will adhere to it. Now, that doesn't mean that down the line I don't come back down to him and say, hey, we're really crowded, this guy's been a model inmate with us, could we make some exception? But the short answer is no, I won't, because I need to have the support of the courts and the DA's office also.
Good answer.
Wow,
Good answer.
I didn't think you were going to do that.
What?
Ask about Paris Hilton.
Well, it's not often we say her name on this show.
Well,
In
no,
fact, this is the first.
And I don't know if you noticed, Nicole Richie's only getting 5 days. So
I hadn't heard that. All I heard is she is in fact pregnant. None of us knew that.
That's
so.
right, yeah. So.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being here.
It was my pleasure.
We
Thank
really
you very much for
appreciate
the
it a great deal.
opportunity. Yep. So.
And as it gets closer to that time, we'll have you back. Okay. So anyway, thanks, Dan, and as always, thanks to all of you, and we'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.
Well, thank you. I appreciate once that's